Just before we get started, did you know that I have a podcast? It's called The Brain Food Show. It covers topics similar to what we do here on Today I Found Out, but in a longer form, sort of more podcasty format. I co-host the show with Dave, and it's a lot of fun. It runs for about an hour, so it's a bit more of a commitment than these short videos, but we think you'll probably like it if you like this show. Get it on all good podcast platforms just by searching Brain Food, one word, or follow the links below. And let's get into it. And we are answering a viewer question today because Azar Safar, possibly the coolest name ever, asks us, why do some clothes have random gibberish Japanese characters on them? Well, here we go. Browse any clothing store and you'll more than likely find at least one t-shirt covered in characters using the Japanese writing system. And if you can read Japanese, you've probably noticed that what's written is often gibberish. Rather interestingly, the reverse is also popular in Japan, where one can find many a t-shirt with random English words instead. Indeed, I've not been to Japan, but this is true in other Asian countries like China, where I have been, and it's not just English words, it could just be random nonsensical phrases. So, how did all of this start, and why isn't anyone bothering to check the meanings? Well, it doesn't really matter, does it? Most people aren't going to be able to read it. We're like, it's Japanese, it looks pretty cool. As far as we can tell, the first Western company to popularly start putting Japanese characters on clothes is the brand Superdry, owned by Supergroup plc. Although Supergroup plc was founded in 1985, the Superdry brand that would make these Japanese writing shirts popular wouldn't exist until 2003, with the first official store being opened a year later in 2004. According to the company's own website, the brand was, to quote, born from a creative collaboration between entrepreneurs Julian Dunkerton and James Holder in Cheltenham. The former previously owned a successful clothing brand that traded under the name Cult Clothing. Holder, on the other hand, similarly founded a clothing company, in this case Bench, and had an established background in graphic design. According to an interview with Holder, one of his key interests is typography, and one of the things he tried to do with the Bench brand was use it in tandem with high-impact imagery to create striking designs for his shirts. As for Dunkerton, his main inspiration was vintage Americana. When the two men met, they believed they could combine these two elements to create a unique clothing style that also incorporated their love of tailored fits, which were popular in Britain at the time. So, where do random Japanese characters come into any of this? Well, according to Holder, he'd always been a fan of Japanese culture, particularly random words. Not really. In particular, the clash of English characters juxtaposed next to Japanese animation and artwork. In his own words, I think I was very comic obsessed when I was young. I was a big fan of 2000 AD and those sorts of comics, and that kind of drifted to manga, and it was then kind of clashing with the two. You'd be taking wonderful, lumpy, bold typography like Helvetica or Avant-Garde, and then clashing that with the high-impact dynamic of manga graphics, the sort of thing you'd see on the streets of Tokyo in neon lights, all running the whole way throughout their packaging. So it was taking big, bold, classic typefaces and just throwing in this electric dynamic of Japanese influence, and it just worked so beautifully. Holder's love of this particular type of design was crystallized when he visited Tokyo and became enamored with the image of Japanese kanji used in combination with English typography in ads and clothing. As for the product that resulted from this, according to Holder, the first t-shirt he designed for the Superdry brand was the now iconic Osaka 6 shirt, a design that apparently went through 5 iterations until Holder found one that properly, to quote him, combined Jules' love of Americana with my love of Japanese-style graphics and tailored fits. The shirt went on to become one of the most popular ever designed, famously being worn by soccer star David Beckham, which helped catapult the fledgling brand to high street prominence. Later shirts released by Superdry similarly incorporated random Japanese elements chosen by Holder almost entirely for their aesthetic value. In fact, according to an interview with the company by a Japanese TV show, nobody working for the British-based company speaks Japanese, and all the Japanese writing on their shirts is created by putting random English words into basic English to Japanese translation software. For this reason, much of what is seen on the shirts comes across as random gibberish to native Japanese speakers. In fact, even the company's own logo contains an example of this, with the stylized Japanese text above the Superdry name meaning maximum dry, do it in Japanese. This is because the company's name was simply translated literally from English to Japanese without thought for the subtle nuances and differences between the two languages. Maximum dry! The success of the brand, as with most things that are popular, inevitably spawned imitators. These imitators endlessly replicated the look of Superdry's clothing, leading to a flood of cheap knockoffs similarly sporting random Japanese characters on them. As you might expect, the fact that Superdry was considered something of a high-end brand known for being expensive and was popularly worn by trend-setting celebrities of the day like David Beckham and Leonardo DiCaprio, this only bolstered demand for a cheaper alternative that the plebeians could afford. Now, as we mentioned previously, Holder was inspired to put random Japanese characters on his company's t-shirts after seeing Japanese t-shirts with random English words on them. So, well, how did this start? Well, the origins of this reverse are unfortunately a little harder to track down, though it would appear to have begun in the immediate aftermath of World War II. Although the US and Japan had been fierce enemies during the war, afterwards there was a mass exportation of American media to the country, which caused a love affair with American culture that, at least to a certain extent, endures to this day, even spawning some rather interesting Japanese traditions like celebrating Christmas dinner with KFC and statues of Colonel Sanders traditionally dressed up as Santa for Christmas. And just as a fun aside here, I absolutely had KFC for Christmas last year. It was awesome. Going back to t-shirts, similar to how certain English speakers are enamored with Japanese, some among the Japanese populace fell in love with the look of the English language, frequently using it in advertising and on clothing. Much like with Superdry, according to an interview with graphic designers working for one of Japan's largest advertising firms, Dentsu, they chose the English words based almost entirely on their decorative function rather than the meaning. Similar to how Holder gushed over the chunky, impractical aesthetic of Japanese characters, Japanese graphic designers have noted that English typography looks cleaner and is less noisy than their own language, and as a result, it's popular for brands to stylize their names in English. As odd as it may seem for a company or brand to stylize their own logo in a language not native to their country, as long as the name is distinctive enough visually, it can stand out well enough. Sort of like a logo. And now for a bonus fact. While ubiquitous today, it turns out the t-shirt in more or less its current form wasn't really a thing until the early 20th century, but in the early going, almost exclusively, it was just an undershirt. By the end of World War II, things started to change, however. The final push for mainstream acceptance of the t-shirt as an outer garment started at the end of World War II, when soldiers returning home began incorporating them into their casual wardrobe, much in the same way they'd done during the war. The popularity of a t-shirt as an outer garment further surged thanks to Marlon Brando and his role as Stanley Kowalski in A Streetcar Named Desire, which featured Brando wearing a tight-fitting, as most were at this point, bicep-caressing t-shirt. Brando's smoldering performance in both the play and the 1951 movie caused a nationwide spike in the sales of t-shirts, proving to the world that the t-shirt could be a sexy, standalone outerwear garment, and not just the sort of rough equivalent to wearing pajama pants out in public. It didn't take that long after for businesses to realize the marketing potential of these mostly blank outer garments, with the likes of Roy Rogers and Walt Disney, among others, soon using them for this purpose, popularizing the now ubiquitous practice of putting design on t-shirts. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do smash that thumbs up button below and do not forget to subscribe. Brand new videos every day of the week. Also, check out that podcast I mentioned, The Brain Food Show. It's pretty good, if I might say so myself. People seem to like it. It gets loads of good reviews. Link below. Thanks for watching.